As the world's strongest man, strength is clearly on my mind, and today I'm going to give you the top 3 exercises to determine who is the strongest in the world. I am going to crown the best exercise to determine who the strongest is. If we had to boil it down to one exercise, now first we got to talk about strength. What is strength? Well, strength is your ability to maximally put out force. How do we determine the strongest person in the world? If we were just doing one exercise, I think that force has to be somewhat translatable to everyday life, and it can't be hugely skill dependent. I think it has to be somewhat, can you move something from A to B? Can it be awkward? And who would be the strongest? Without further ado, let's get into it. The first exercises that we're going to talk about are not really exercises, but they are the manly things that you can do and the things that I get asked about all the time. First thing is arm wrestling. Arm wrestling, there's no real way to quantify it. There's an argument to say the best arm wrestler in the world.
Multiple-time WAL champion, considered by many to be the best ever to pull, and a future Hall of Famer, Devin.
Took care of it.
Shout out Devin Lorat. That he is probably the strongest man in the world in a certain element. But there's so much technique involved. Once you get into the nuance of arm wrestling, there's so much to unpack. And a objectively weaker person can beat an objectively stronger person if they have the technique right. But definitely an honorable mention. Arm wrestling is probably the number one thing that we get recommended for me to go do on the channel. We do have some hopes to meet up with Devin Lorat soon. But please tell me, what is it about arm wrestling that you find so fascinating? Go ahead and pop that in the comments. The next exercise up in the manliest category, the number one thing that shouted at me on the street, how much you bench? I will never answer the question because there's a king of bench press named Julius Maddox, 795-pound raw bench press. That is phenomenal. And I would say less technical than something like arm wrestling where you're also combating another person. Still a huge amount of technique involved and how to use your lats, your traps to press properly. Really good exercise for me. Too isolated to crack the contender list, but definitely on the manliest list of exercises. An honorable mention here is a guy named Jimmy Kolb, equipped bench press, which those guys are mental. Like their arms would be all bruised up. This might be the heaviest lift, main lift of all time. He did a 1,350-pound bench press in multiply powerlifting equipment. Shout out Jimmy Kolb. Now, I said strength is expressing maximal force. It's not necessarily power, but we have to talk about the most powerful person in the world, which is Lasha, for sure. Olympic lifting and the ability to move a bar from the ground overhead in an explosive manner is something that is absolutely phenomenal, hugely technical, massive amount of respect. So Lasha's taking 225 kilos in the snatch, which is from the ground straight to overhead. He's also done a 264 kilo clean and jerk, obviously from the ground to the shoulders, up overhead. These numbers are insane. To be able to not just move that weight, but absolutely launch and control that weight is phenomenal. Now we're going to talk about the number one contenders for the top 3. They didn't quite make it. This is going to upset a lot of people, but squats have come in at number 4 for me. The reason that squats didn't quite crack the list is because there is an element of technique and there is a large element of genetics involved where the length of your femur is going to be hugely dependent on how much you can squat. Now, to talk about some squat numbers, best equipped squat is 595 kilos and best raw with wrap squat by an animal Dan Bell, 505 kilos. For reference, that hasn't even been deadlifted yet. It is a strength exercise. It is expressing strength. It is using your whole body. But I think there are some other exercises that encompass that a little bit better. Now, we will get to the top 3, but I would be remiss not to mention the Strength Unknown series by Martins Licis. Go ahead. If you haven't already, check that out if you're interested in unique feats of strength. I don't exactly know where to put these because there are some phenomenal feats of strength, but I don't know that much about them. We've got a 211 kilo stone to shoulder. That's massively functional, very impressive. And it's stood since 1993, that record. And there's something called the monolithic stone that they covered in this series. And a guy's done a 305 kilo monolithic stone to shoulder. I can't even wrap my head around exactly what that is. I don't understand how you can get a 300 kilo anything to your shoulder. Crazy, absolutely crazy. That's in the Basque Country video. If you guys want to watch that, we'll link it in the description. Now we're going to the top three. Before we do, if you want to get strong, I sell one-off programs linked in the description that are there for you to use to become strong in 2024. It's more about what your body can do than what your body looks like. And if you want to be strong, you might as well learn it from the world's strongest man. Go ahead and follow those through 12 weeks of education and 12 weeks of programming. Let's get on to it. Top three exercises for strength. Number three is Atlas stones. This is one, it's not a massively technical movement. Some people might think it is, but really a stone is a stone. You go in, you squeeze it, you get it in your lap. After the first couple of times, you can get the majority of the technique understood. Not perfected, but understood. There's an element of just rawness, and then you have to deadlift the stone. You have to squat the stone. You have to be strong enough to squeeze the stone. So we're talking every single body part and multiple fundamental movement patterns that the stone encompasses. And World's Strongest Man tends to think that this is the best test of strength. It is one of the only exercises that is always in the heats and in the finals at World's Strongest Man. The world record in this is the Albatross, Tom Stoltman, bar none the best stone lifter in the world right now. He is absolutely phenomenal. He has done a 286 kilo stone or 630 pounds. This does take me back to old mate who did a 305 kilo monolithic stone. Again, no idea how that's done. I know, well, I don't know. I can imagine what a 286 kilo Atlas stone would feel like. That would be massive. That would be crushing your legs. Anyway, that is number three. Number two is the log press. This is because it takes the Atlas stone, but it adds an overhead press. And for me, the fundamental elements of movements are push, pull, hinge, overhead press, squat, deadlift, and carry. I said deadlift and hinge, same thing, and carry. There's 6. Now, we get a deadlift to our lap, albeit fairly light. We get a front squat, a hip thrust to get it to your shoulders, and then we're overhead pressing. This is encompassing a lot of fundamental movement patterns. And the world record holder right now is maybe the strongest person in the world if we take out all of the elements of strongman and just go who is the strongest in Sheikh Sanu, Iron BB, 2023 World Log Lift Championships. I was fortunate enough to be there and watch him do this lift, which was an absolute honor. Now that's number 2. Leaves the question, what is number 1? Guess in the comments, what do you think the number 1 exercise is? What do you think I'm going to say? I'll give you a hint. It's the only other exercise than Atlas stones that tends to be in World's Strongest Man twice, in the heats and in the finals. And of course, it is the deadlift. The reason being, it is heavy, very heavy. It is not massively technical like a clean and jerk or a snatch. Technical enough that you need to be competent to do it safely, but it's like a leg press meets a back extension. Your whole body has to be tight, and when you do a heavy deadlift, your whole body is screaming for help. The world record in this right now, up for debate. It's either 500 kilos or 501 kilos. Regardless, Eddie and Thor, likely the 2 statically strongest people to have ever walked the planet. Phenomenal in their deadlifting, and something that spans multiple disciplines. It's done in powerlifting, it's done in strongman, it's done in CrossFit, it's done in accessory training for things like NFL players. And for those who think NFL players are the strongest in the world, look at their deadlift numbers and they are nowhere near what it is for a competitive strength athlete. So deadlifts are my number 1. Go ahead, debate in the comments, agree, disagree. What would you have included? What are your honorable mentions? And if you had to determine the strongest person in the world with 1 exercise, what would that exercise be? Thanks a lot for watching, guys. As per usual, regardless of how you're trying to be strong, never forget to lift heavy and be kind.